Hello AOS fans, Robin here, back with our very first ever full painting video. Pete and I will soon be playing Necromunda as soon as lockdown is finished, and we've been painting up our warbands in anticipation of this great event, and we thought you might like to have a little look at how we did that. I'm not the best painter in the world, this isn't going to be a Duncan Rhodes or a Zerastro situation, but hopefully you'll learn something, or maybe as I go along I'll learn something and you can watch me develop, which may be of interest to some. So I'm painting this Escher model. The model was put together with Tamiya cement, polystyrene cement, with a small amount of plastic dissolved in it to act as a filler. And as you probably saw from the first picture, she was primed with a little bit of Wraithbone model paints, Citadel colour with their contrast paints. I will be using some contrast paints. Paintbrushes, I like to use Rosemary and Co. Series 33, and I'll be using a 0, a 1 and a 2 during this video. So I start off by painting the metal colour bits. It's an acrylic Vallejo metal colour. I used to have lead belcher, but it dried out and I didn't replace it. I prefer it because it gives it's quite a runny thin paint, it's an airbrush paint, and it gives a really nice coverage. It's a little bit darker than lead belcher, but I do really like this paint. So we're painting any little bits of armour plating on her, as well as the weapons, so her sword and the gun, and some of her accessories as well. The object of this painting exercise was to try and get the models painted in a reasonably quick fashion, so that they also look quite good as well. So there are some bits in here that I have painted just sort of silver, and I haven't perhaps done a certain level of detail work that some more experienced painters might do, but I wanted to be good enough to look good enough on the tabletop and under our battle cam when we play with it. So I just also put a bit of metal on her battle bikini, and then also filling in the belt clasp, which is a bit lower, and then below that there's another little buckle, which are both filled in with this gunmetal. And again, you might want to use more advanced colour palette, but I've gone for just silver on a lot of stuff. Anything that basically look metal, I've put metal on it. Once the metal is complete, the next step is to dry brush, which I've done with some Vallejo Game Colour Chainmail Silver. So for this step, I use a cheap brush that I've picked up on eBay, and you fill your bristles full of the paint that you want, and then rub it off on an old cloth, or maybe on the back of your hand. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that, but you want a very small amount of paint on the brush, and then you just draw it gently across the raised surfaces of the bits of the model you're painting, and the little bits of paint come off and you get a nice rudimentary highlight. This, I don't use dry brushing a lot, but I do find it particularly effective for metal, and then later on I'll be adding a wash into the recesses and you get the nice kind of shiny effect on the top. It's a very quick and easy way of shading metal, and it looks particularly good on gunmetal. If you're using a mixture of contrast paints and ordinary paints, if you are dry brushing, you do have to be careful not to get any on the lighter areas, otherwise you may have to do a lot of undercoating recovering, which can be a bind, so do watch out for that. With that complete, we're going to add some flesh tone. To do this, I'm using a 1-to-1 mix of Gunnyman Flesh, which is a contrast paint with some technical contrast medium. I water it down 1-to-1. It gives you a little bit more control. By applying two thinner coats, you can get a better coverage if you want, or in this case I want quite a pale flesh tone, so I've just watered it down so it's not so strong a colour on the model. flesh tone completed, I move on to my next colour, which is orange. And again, I've gone for a contrast paint. I've gone for Grifthound Orange, and I've watered that down with 1:1, again, technical contrast. As you can see, I've put my contrast medium in a dropper bottle. I find that makes it much easier to use. You can see I had a bit of recording wrong. I've already put a bit of orange on, but now I'm putting it on in earnest and just covering as much of the fabric as I want to. I've actually gone for a two-tone motif with this model, and I'll be adding some purple later. Purple and orange actually harks back to a very early unit of Bretonians I had in a very fetching purple and orange cross colour motif. I should do the hair a mixture of orange and purple too, with just this forelock at the front here, orange. So that's the orange complete, and I'll then move on to one of my favourite contrast colours, which is Black Templar. This gives a really nice coverage. I'm using this neat straight out of the pot, or rather put it a bit on the palette and then use the paintbrush to paint it on, but straight neat, no watering down here. It makes a nice strong colour and it works really well. And I've chosen to do the sort of leggings boots black and a few other bits of detail too. And I'll finish off by doing the ammo casing on the gun. Finally, I have to paint on the very thin line that constitutes the string for the model's eye patch. Next up is snakebite leather for all the leather parts of the miniature. This is one of my favourite contrast paints. It's great straight out of the bottle as I'm using it here, but it can be watered down in all sorts of numbers of consistencies to add. I've done stonework with it, I've done woodwork with it, and of course I've done leather with it. So in this miniature I'm basically doing the leather gun strap with the snakebite leather. Of course, when I say watered down, I do mean watered down with the contrast paint medium. As well as doing the gun strap, I'm also doing the leather arm braces on this Escher. And I've carried on that motif throughout the entire warband / gang. Here I've realised I've missed a little armoured neck plate, so I'm just adding a little bit of the gunmetal from step 1 there. And the little shark's tooth at the bottom. Similarly, I've chosen not to do it bone, I've done it as a metal tooth. So our model's starting to come together now. I'm going to add some wood, mainly to the stock of the gun she's carrying. And again, it's a mixture of wildwood and contrast medium. Wildwood's a really good colour for wood, but I find it a little bit strong without that extra contrast medium added in. Again, you can do multiple coats if it's not as strong as you would like after dilution. Next up, we're going to do more leather. This time I want a darker leather colour, and I've gone for Mournfang Brown, which is how I've often done leather for a long time. Mournfang Brown, and later on there'll be a Nuln oil wash over that. I've just done that for the little bag on the underside of this kind of bandolier thing she's got on her, just to differentiate it from the leather strap itself. Here I'm adding another coat of the Wildwood mix, and just to darken up that handle. I wasn't quite happy with it, but I'm quite pleased with the overall look afterwards, a kind of weathered wood look. Next up are the purple areas of the miniature. I've gone away from contrast paints here. In my testing miniatures, I found that I didn't like the coverage that the purple Magus gave the miniature, so I've gone for a straight up Vallejo Game Colour Hex Lichen, or any Games Workshop equivalent would do. A 2 thin coat of this gives a decent solid finish that I can then highlight in a later step. Moving on to the hair now, start by doing this lower forelock here, down low, and then the base of the hair. I want to give the rest of the hair a different colour to the material that's on the Escher model, and for that I've gone for a wet blend of yellow, and which is a Vallejo Game Colour yellow, and purple, the Hex Lichen again, and then finally some Screaming Pink to give it a sort of pinky orange tinge at the ends. And I've done a wet blend, and this was done afterwards. This isn't the wet blend that I did in the actual painting. And it's not a very good one actually, but you best basically you put the 2 colours together, mix them and get a variety. I didn't put enough Screamer Pink in this one, so you'll see I'm going to add some more in a second. To get a different array of colours, and then I'm going to mix in the yellow too, and I've still got a bit of the yellow. It gives it a slight orangey tinge, and then I will paint this onto the miniature in stages. So the lower half, I start with the darker colours, blending into the purple that I've already put there. And then I get gradually lighter as I move up towards the tips of the hair. You see the brush is slightly pinker here. And again, you've got an orange tone on the brush now, slightly, just to brush this up. I will do some highlights to lighten it back down again to give it a slightly more pronounced sort of orangey, pinky tinge. And I think this makes the hair look a little bit more organic and differentiate it from the cloth. And then one final tone, which is very yellow, for the very, very tips of the Mohican. Next up we have Mephiston Red, and this will be for the little cable that connects some of her paraphernalia on her belt. Next up is some Vallejo flat blue for the eyepiece of her eye patch / lens, but any pale blue will be good for this. I'm keeping the basis for this project very simple. It's just a simple coat of Vallejo metal colour, the gunmetal colour again. I'm doing it after painting the miniature just in case of any spillage as I go, and I'll just slop this on with an old brush. Next up is a trusty black wash. The bottle says Nuln oil, but actually this is a Vallejo equivalent that I bought in bulk, just mixed in the same Nuln oil pot. And this is going to go on the metal areas, but not the floor, just the metal areas on the miniature. For the metal floor, I'm doing a mixture of Seraphim Sepia and Nuln oil, though again these are the Vallejo equivalents, which I've bought in bulk. I use this mixture quite a lot, so I've actually made up a dropper bottle with it all in, which makes it just a bit easier to use. And again, kind of just slop this on fairly roughly, trying to avoid the feet, and make sure you get in all those recesses. These textured Necromunda tiles have some quite deep recesses. You need to make sure you get in all of those, and inevitably find out that you haven't when it's all dried. To help bring the purple areas together, I just use a little wash of Druchii Violet. As you can see, the miniature is starting to come together now. You could probably call that done. It's decent, fairly decent tabletop standard. But I'm going to add a few highlights, starting with very light Calgar blue for the lens. I'm actually pretty terrible at this, but the little highlight goes at the top corner, so you kind of imagine that the light is catching the lens. It gives you a little bit of depth. That's the theory anyway. The more astute amongst you would have noticed there was a little feature on the front of the leather skirt that I haven't touched. I'm going to do this in bone white. I think it's a bone. I'm not quite sure what it was, why I left it till late. Here we go. Just a little bit of bone white from Vallejo on there. Just a strip goes across there. It's one of those Games Workshop details that I can never quite work out what it's meant to be. For the purple fabric details, I'm using Genestealer Purple as a highlight. I'll start with a mixture of 1:1 with the original Hex Lichen and then lighten up to the full Genestealer Purple. Next up is a little contrast skeleton horde. I'm going to paint that on the bone motif that's on the model's skirt. For the base, I'm using a mixture of chainmail silver and Balthasar Gold in a 1:1 mix, and I'm just going to dry brush that across the sculpted base. This effect is very simple, very easy to do, but I think it's really effective and just kind of homogenises the gang as a whole. They're all the same. I have seen people put more interesting things on their bases, but I actually really like this simple effect on the base. Next up, I add a little silver highlight to some of the metal parts of the model, just to kind of show them might be worn, bits of tarnish rubbed off, or the way the light might catch it, just in a few places. Nothing too serious. I can tend to overdo this, so I try and keep it very simple and not add too much, otherwise I feel like it ruins the work that went in beforehand. You'll note I use my finger sometimes just to sort of rub down the effect. If I put too much paint on, there we go, just to smudge it a little bit and just still give that highlight but without it being too strong. On this piece it's almost become like a nervous tick. It's like do a little bit and then rub it off, but actually I think I quite like that effect. Don't feel afraid to sort of be a bit rough with these. They do actually still look quite good, especially on the metal parts of the model. For highlighting the hair, I'm going back to my wet cut blend mix, and this time I'll go backwards. So I'll start with the yellow and highlight the back top areas and then basically work down into the darker recesses. I'm not sure whether this is the correct way to do it, if there is a correct way in painting, but this seems to work for me. So I'm just highlighting the very edge of the hair with the yellow now and try and make them a little bit brighter. The final job is to paint the base rim. I've chosen to do these black. I do normally stick to black, and this is the game colour black that I use for that. And I just did a couple of coats on the edge to make sure it's nice and smooth. This paint actually finishes up a little bit shiny, so I might change it for future warbands, but we'll see. As you can see, I've got rid of the painting handle and used an old paint pot because you can't get around the edge on a painting handle. And that's it. There's the finished model. Not the best paint job ever, but I'm very pleased with that. And I think with the rest of the band, she looks pretty striking. I really do need to improve my photography skills if I'm going to do any more of these videos. I hope you enjoyed it. Do let me know what you think. I know my painting isn't brilliant, but hopefully you found this interesting and entertaining. I actually found the voiceover quite a lot harder than I anticipated. But I'll try and bring some more humour to future videos and I'll get a bit more used to what I'm doing. And there we are, there's the warband. Not all of it, but there's the gang together at last. But thanks for watching. If you did enjoy this video, you can look forward to more painting videos from Agents of Sigmar soon, hopefully. Bye!